Earl Whitaker didn't look like a hero. He was just an old man in a dusty cap, buying a loaf of bread and a few eggs at the local grocery store. He barely had enough for himself, just enough to get by. But when he saw a young woman struggling to pay for her groceries, her hands shaking as she put items back, he stepped forward, pulled out a crumpled 20, and covered the rest without saying a word. He didn't ask for her name. He didn't give his. He just tipped his hat, walked out, and headed back to his dying farm, alone. But 24 hours later, the sound of engines roared down his gravel driveway. And when he opened his front door, he found his empty land surrounded by trucks. Dozens of them. This is the story of how a quiet act of kindness planted something bigger than Earl ever expected. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories like this, of compassion, redemption, and the power of human connection. Earl Whitaker had spent his whole life on that land. 52 years of early mornings, rough hands, and dirt beneath his nails. The house was old, the porch uneven, and the barn leaned like it was too tired to keep standing. But to Earl, it was home. He'd buried his wife under the oak tree out back, raised 3 kids who'd long since moved to cities with clean desks and electric cars. They called when they could, sent money sometimes. But Earl never asked for much, never liked being a burden. This year, the corn didn't take. The well had started to dry, and the bank's letters, thick and stamped urgent, sat unopened on the kitchen table. Still, every morning, Earl laced up his boots, buttoned his flannel, and walked the field like it was still alive. Not because he believed it was, but because he hoped it could be. The townspeople knew him, most liked him, some pitied him. But no one expected anything more. An old man, too stubborn to quit, too proud to ask for help. Earl didn't need much, just a little food, a little dignity, and a place to sit when the sun went down. But life had grown quiet, and the land, once full of laughter and harvest, now whispered only wind and memory. That morning, with just a few crumpled bills in his wallet, Earl drove his rusted pickup into town, not knowing that by sunset the next day, his life would change. The grocery store was quiet that morning. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The aisles smelled faintly of old bread and overripe bananas. Earl moved slow, the way farmers do when they've spent years listening to the land. Measured, patient, tired. He placed a loaf of bread, a small carton of eggs, and a can of coffee on the counter. That was all he could afford, and just barely. In front of him stood a young woman, late 20s. Holding a toddler on her hip, her other hand fumbled through her purse. She looked worn down, like life had been leaning on her shoulders a little too hard, a little too long. The cashier scanned her groceries. The total blinked on the screen. Her eyes didn't rise. She started pulling items back. First the milk, then the apples, then the jar of baby food. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "I'm sorry, I thought I had enough." Earl watched. He didn't say a word, just stepped forward, pulled a folded 20 from his flannel shirt pocket, and laid it gently on the counter. She turned, eyes wide. "You don't have to—" But Earl was already shaking his head. "Someone helped me once," he said quietly. "I'm just passing it on." No big speech, no thanks needed. He tipped his cap, gave the toddler a small smile, and walked out the door. He didn't even tell her his name. Just climbed into his old pickup, turned the key, and drove home to a quiet field, never knowing the ripple he'd just started. The day after the grocery store felt like every other. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that looked like they wanted to rain, but never did. The ground was dry. The wind barely moved. Earl sat at the edge of his porch, elbows on his knees, staring out at the field that had once fed 3 generations. Now it was nothing but dust and stubborn weeds. The barn door creaked in the breeze. A chicken clucked somewhere behind the shed. The world was quiet. Too quiet. Inside, the same 3 envelopes waited on the table. One from the power company, one from the bank, and one that didn't have a return address. He hadn't opened any of them. Instead, he boiled water for instant coffee, the kind his wife used to hate. He poured it into a chipped mug with half a handle and took it back to the porch. He thought about the girl in the store, how she wouldn't meet his eyes, how her child had looked at him, pure trust in tiny, tired eyes. He didn't expect anything for helping, didn't think about it as a big moment, just something a man does when he sees someone who needs a hand. By noon, Earl had done his usual loop, checked the fence line, kicked at the pump that hadn't worked right since spring, fed the last of the chickens. He paused by the field gate, hands on the top rail, letting the silence stretch. The sun was low when he went back inside. He made himself a sandwich. White bread, no butter, 1 slice of ham. He sat down and ate in silence. The kind of silence that stretches on too long and starts to feel like company. That night, he fell asleep to the sound of cicadas and the creak of old wood. But far down the county road, past where the trees curve into nothing, engines were humming. Headlights cut through the dark, and somewhere, behind the wheel of one of those trucks, a woman had made a call. The next morning, Earl woke up before the sun, same as always. His bones ached like usual. His knees complained when he stood. He pulled on the same faded flannel, tied the same worn boots, and stepped out onto the porch with a sigh and a mug of yesterday's coffee. He didn't notice it at first, just a distant rumble. Faint, like a thunderstorm still 3 counties away. But it wasn't thunder. As the sound grew louder, Earl walked out to the end of the gravel drive, his eyes narrowed. Something was coming. 1 truck, then another, then another. Pickup trucks, flatbeds, utility vans, all of them turning onto his long, dusty road like they had a reason to be there. He stepped back. Maybe the bank was finally sending someone. Maybe the county was here to take what was left. But as the first truck pulled up, it came to a gentle stop. The driver stepped out. Mid-40s. Boots. Clipboard. Company logo on his jacket. Not government. Not collectors. The man nodded. "You Earl Whitaker?" Earl hesitated. "Depends who's asking." The man smiled. "I'm Josh. My daughter said you helped her yesterday. Covered her groceries when no one else would." Before Earl could reply, the man looked over his shoulder. Behind him, more trucks were pulling in. Dozens of them. Some with toolboxes. Some hauling equipment. One was a mobile kitchen. Another had crates of vegetables. A woman in a hard hat waved. 2 teenagers carried bags of seeds. A vet stepped out with a portable animal care kit. Earl blinked, confused. What is this?" Josh tucked the clipboard under his arm. "My daughter told her story online. Said a stranger helped her when she had nothing. Turns out, a lot of people read it, and a lot of them wanted to help him back." Earl stood frozen as one of the trucks opened its doors and a man began unloading fresh fence posts. Another crew started measuring the broken irrigation lines. Someone handed him a bottle of cold water and said, "We're just here to help, sir. You've done more than you think." Earl looked down the road. More trucks were coming. More people, more supplies. He looked at his fields. Dry, cracked, hopeless just yesterday. And now, for the first time in years, something was moving. The sun hadn't even reached the top of the sky when Earl's empty farm became a hive of motion. Hammers echoed from the barn. Chainsaws buzzed through fallen limbs. Shovels bit into the dry earth that hadn't seen a good harvest in years. Volunteers moved like they'd known this land forever. They patched fences, laid new pipe, hauled scrap out of the barn that had been sitting there since Earl's boys were teenagers. Someone installed a new water tank. Another crew arrived with fresh lumber and siding, talking about raising a new roof before sunset. Earl stood in the middle of it all, hands still in his pockets, unsure what to say. A man his age handed him a folded lawn chair and said, "Sit, you've earned it." But Earl didn't sit. He couldn't. His hands were shaking too much. He watched as a group of strangers turned his dying land into a working farm again, and none of them asked for anything. The young woman from the store came by later that afternoon. She was wearing the same coat, same quiet eyes, but this time she had her little boy with her. He held a small drawing in his hand, a sun over a barn, with stick figures and the word "thank you" scrawled in crayon. She smiled through tears. "You didn't have to help me, but you did, and you didn't even ask why." Earl looked down at the child, then back at her. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. All he could say was, "I've been alone a long time. Felt good to do something that mattered." She hugged him. No words. Just gratitude. By sunset, the farm didn't look perfect, but it looked alive. The water pump worked again. The barn stood straight. A group of volunteers even cleaned out his kitchen and filled his fridge. One of the teenagers yelled, "Hey, Earl, you've got chickens again!" And out came a crate full of hens from someone's truck. Earl laughed, not the kind of polite laugh you give a neighbor, but a real one, deep, rough, full of dust and relief. A week later, Earl stood at the edge of his field as the sun broke across the horizon. The land looked different now. Not perfect, not new, but healing. The fence line was whole again. The soil had been turned. A new row of seedlings waited to grow. The barn, freshly painted red, caught the morning light like it was proud to stand tall again. Earl ran his hand along the porch railing, now sanded smooth. Someone had carved a small message into the wood, "Because kindness comes back." He sat with his coffee, the good kind someone had dropped off in a care package. He watched the chickens peck at the dirt. He smiled when the irrigation system clicked on without needing a kick. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was waiting for something to go wrong. He felt still, present, grateful. The young woman came back once more with her little boy. This time, they stayed for dinner. She helped him cook. The boy ran through the grass barefoot, laughing, chasing the new puppy someone had left behind in a box marked, "For Earl." When they left, she paused at the door. "You gave me hope when I had none," she said. "Looks like the world decided it was your turn." He nodded. "I didn't do much." She smiled. "That's the thing about kindness. You never know how far it'll go." Earl sat alone again, but he didn't feel lonely. The land was quiet, but not empty. A single act. A crumpled bill at a grocery store. A moment that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Earl Whitaker noticed. And that small moment rippled into something far bigger than he ever imagined. He hadn't saved the world, but maybe he saved one person. And that was enough. Earl never asked for anything. He didn't go viral, didn't post it online, didn't do it for praise. He just helped, because he could. And when the world had a chance to help him back, it did. What would you have done in Earl's place? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this, right here on Stories Unfolded.